So, good morning and welcome back to another CEO series. I'm very pleased today to welcome our latest guest, Matthew Taylor, who's co-founder of a really interesting agency business in the UK called Common Ground. I'm not going to explain it better than you are, Matthew. So, shall I hand over and you can kind of tell everybody what Common Ground is and what you focus on?
Morning. Thank you, Simon. Common Ground is a digital marketing agency. We're 100% remote. We used to be based around Oxford, and we specialise in SEO and PPC within the SaaS, education, and property markets.
Great. And roughly, just to give people a bit of a view, what's your head count at the moment? If you want to share, kind of rough revenue numbers, it's up to you. But just to give people.
So on our kind of growth journey, there's around 12 of us. I'm always slightly unsure. I usually have to count Slack channels in order to get the exact head count. And last year, we kind of was our first seven-figure year. For UK seven figures. We've been US seven figures for a while. We're kind of a decent size.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Thank you. Because I think, different phases require different or have different challenges. So I think that'll be helpful for people watching. So, and I guess that brings me on to my first question, given the stage that you're at, so, 12 people, circa £1 million-ish turnover, what is the challenge? What are the things keeping you awake at night? Because let's face it, we all have them, don't we?
I'll be honest, more often than not, it's my kids keep me awake at night rather than my business. Being around £1 million is essentially where everything starts to break. So all the stuff that gets you to about £1 million starts to stop working or starts to creak as when you hit that point. And it's getting the processes in places, because obviously the first hurdle you get to with an agency is kind of having that confidence to hire and trust other people to do the work. And then kind of as you get bigger and as you get to the stage that we're at and where kind of we are, is kind of it's getting the senior leaders within the team to kind of take on more responsibility and really allow me and my business partner to kind of focus on the business a lot more than we have been able to at this up until this point.
Yeah, it's really difficult, isn't it? At that, there's that typical glass ceiling, 1 to 1.5 million rev kind of ceiling where, like you've gone through the process of hiring generalists and now you need specialists and actually specialists to start leading teams and, start shedding off and delegating some of that and making sure that the quality remains is always very difficult. But I guess, you've started to fix some of those problems by the sound of it. So like are there any problems recently that you've kind of, you've had a really good stab at and you feel most proud of, not, they're never perfect, are they? But you feel like you made
Certainly, like one of the biggest issues we have running into the pandemic, like the pandemic was actually really useful for Dan and I, my business partner, because it literally forced us to force a lot of the issues that we had up until that point. So operationally, it allowed us to fix a lot, because we literally, the problem that we were having at that point was, depending on who you're working with in the agency and their strengths, you'd get kind of different results, different focuses for the project. So going into the pandemic, Dan and I had to literally service every client, because that's where the UK business was at the moment, at that point. And it just meant that we were able to get in place all of the processes we needed from the delivery side to deliver consistently for clients. So actually coming out of that, we had a really clear, if you're doing keyword research, you do it this way, this is how you do it. It meant that our results were a lot more kind of repeatable across every client that we had, rather than just kind of whoever's working with the stronger members of the team. So kind of that was one of the things that has allowed us to kind of take the next step, so we can then bring in people to kind of manage the team and know that the more junior members of the team have that process and they know what to do. We're not asking people to teach them how to do that. We're asking people to kind of manage them around kind of growth and strategic things and those kind of things. So that's kind of where we're getting into. And one of the most recent things we just put into place is kind of kind of a strategy calendar type thing. So obviously everybody in the team, we're always working to a strategy, but finding a way to documenting it was like one of the difficulties, and having something that you could refer a client back to regularly on monthly calls and stuff and show actually it's not just this is what we are doing, it's like here's why, here's who we're targeting, here's the KPIs that we're trying to maximize at this point, and that kind of stuff. And that's leading to some much better conversations, like strategic level conversations rather than tactical level conversations, and really helps with buy-in as well. So obviously one of the things running an agency is you have to get the buy-in from clients in order to, you can give the best advice in the world. If nobody takes that advice, no one implements it, it doesn't, like, they're not going to see any results. So getting that buy-in is essential, and the strategy calendar has really helped with that as well.
Yeah, like you said, it's just the start of the enterprise in the back office, isn't it? And getting standard operating procedures in place is a key part of that to create a repeatable process. And I think a lot of people miss that. And I think the building of trust is a very interesting thing as well, isn't it? I regularly talk about the kind of the missing bit of that, because I think agencies are, and they have to, right? When you pitch, you have to pitch the future a little bit, sell the future, because they want expertise. But of course, I think then you try and deliver the future, and it might be a little bit messy, the messy middle, as you're kind of trying to develop those kind of skill sets and processes internally. Whereas actually keeping things simple for a while, delivering the basics really well, and earning trust allows you to then do that stuff later. But people forget that trust bit, I think. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and the forecasting one is an absolute pain all the time as well, because new clients, they want to know what is possible, and you're working off quite often relatively limited data, or you're working off things like SEMrush, Google Ad Planner, that kind of thing, and the data that they give you in reality is kind of ballpark at best. So you've almost said, you've put in their mind that this is what can be delivered. And then it's trying to meet that expectation, and in order to do that, you have to get buy-in. We always see with clients, the ones that fully commit, take on board everything that we kind of recommend, are the ones where you see much better results. It's the ones that are consistently kind of almost questioning, or you're having to resell them on it every time, is the ones where results are a lot slower, or they kind of ultimately they never get there because you're not actually doing what you've told them they need to do, essentially.
Yeah, and I think you're obviously talking from a place there of lived experience, I think, which is always really valuable to anybody listening. And so I guess that kind of quite naturally leads me on to kind of a really interesting key question, which is knowing what you know now, what might you have done differently from the start?
Yeah, it's definitely around kind of getting the processes in place. I think when you start, it's like I can very much do everything myself, and the best person to do it is myself as well. I think that's the first thing that kind of a lot of founders have to get past, is you may be the best person to do it, but you can't do the delivery, you can't do the sales, you can't do the finance, you can't do literally everything. So it's kind of, if you can build in those processes sooner rather than later, that's massively beneficial. And it might be that you're building the processes for everything other than the delivery stuff, and you do the delivery stuff yourself. But it means that everything else isn't taking up a huge proportion of your time. And just I did have a discussion when I was first looking at hiring somebody, and I almost let somebody talk me out of it, in essence, and it kind of delayed my business by about a year, I think, by somebody going, oh, do you think it's really the right time? And that kind of seed got planted in my head, and it was like, actually, if it was the right time at that point. I needed to kind of trust what I knew about my business and the finances and stuff, and kind of take that person on, make that step from, because I never wanted to be a freelancer. I always set the business up, my first business up, as being an agency. So it was very much like, I never treated myself as a freelancer, even when the business was just me prior to merging and forming Common Ground. So it's just kind of take that step, believe in yourself, I guess, and but in order to do that, make sure you have all the processes so you can effectively delegate rather than just taking someone on and having them sat around doing nothing, because you can do it better yourself.
Very good advice, and yeah, I think those people thinking about doing it, that's going to be really helpful for them. So, the other side of the equation, of course, is not like internal but external, and I think the process of working with clients can be like it's one of the reasons why we get into agency, right? Because it can be the most rewarding things, but it can also be one of the most frustrating as well. So I think if you were from an agency person's perspective, like if you could offer advice to any clients in terms of how to get the most out of their agency, what would you say what advice would you give there?
I think it would generally be believe in them and take the advice on board, because ultimately agencies don't want to get fired, they don't want to underdeliver, and the advice that they give you is the ultimately should be the best advice that they can give you based on the information that you've shared with them. So if you do find yourself consistently saying, well, yeah, no, we can't do that, or it's not the right time, or whatever the kind of the negative response you're giving, kind of try and figure out, is that because we've not given the agency enough information to give us better advice effectively? It's probably that's the main disconnect that we see, is quite often it's like what you have or what the client has in their mind of what they've told you might be completely different to what you've understood or the agency's understood about what the situation is and what's possible and that kind of thing. And if you can kind of get that a lot closer together, it's not always going to be perfect, but if you can close that gap, the quality of the recommendations you'll get is a lot better. But ultimately, if you've been through the whole process of hiring an agency, you've got to believe that they're going to deliver for you, and you've got to give them the chance to deliver for you, and ultimately believe that to a certain extent they might know more than you do about. So I probably know more than my clients do. In fact, I do know more than my clients do generally about digital marketing and SEO and paid advertising. They know more about their business. So kind of if it's purely down to, is this going to work from an SEO point of view, trust the agency, essentially, and do your best about kind of equipping your agency with the information about your business.
Yeah, and I think that is all about the importance of a really good solid onboarding process, isn't it? Because you're right, greater understanding or almost always kind of equals greater success, doesn't it? So I think that's great advice. So I think that bigger picture then, as we start to kind of round out the conversation, like why are you doing this, and like what does success look like for you? Because I think everybody takes a slightly different view of that, don't they? Some people want to build something that allows them to travel the world. Other people want to build something that is going to turn into the next Google. But where are you on that scale, and has that changed over time as you've kind of gone through this journey?
Oh yeah, it's absolutely changed over time. The one thing that hasn't changed is kind of, I left the agency that I worked for before because I just felt like I'd hit a ceiling, but I also felt that I just wanted to do things the way that I wanted to do them, and felt that I think everybody who starts an agency thinks that they've got a better way of doing it, essentially, and I was no different. Certainly at that stage, the previous agency I came from was it was a really good agency anyway. So that ultimately has never changed, and I'm fully confident in the approach that we take is the best possible approach that there is. I think what's changed over the time period, because I've now been self-employed for 11 years, I guess, is my personal circumstances. So I now have 2 children and a family, and kind of a lot more responsibilities than when I started, when I was just renting a room and was single. So it was a lot less stress at that point, effectively, and a lot less fear of failure, I guess. But I guess what's changed is kind of what I've been doing it for has always been kind of one side has been, I think I can do it better. The other side is the freedom that being your own boss and running your own agency gives you. It's not don't get me wrong, I'm answerable to clients, I'm still answerable to my team and everybody internally, but I do have the freedom to kind of spend time with my kids. Have ultimately, I think what Dan and I are looking for from the business and the route is the freedom to choose, and whether that is an exit by selling it, whether that's a more of an exit by bringing on the senior team and making it and getting them to run the agency, and us having kind of being less integral to the agency. It's that freedom to choose to what you do, and I think that's what certainly building an agency is provided. Like with the current agency, we're only 5 years in, so it's still relatively early days, but again, we've just got the freedom that we never would have working for other people, I think.
Yeah, I think that's very eloquently captured, actually, because you're right. You have to. There's a lot of sacrifice, isn't there, in running and building your own business, but equally, there has to be upside, and I think that's captured the upside quite nicely. So, I think that rounds out the kind of the main part. Are you up for a kind of a couple of quick fire questions to end the session?
Absolutely. I'm not sure I can give quick fire answers, but I'll give it my best go. I tend to waffle.
Right. Okay. Let's have a go. So, first one. So, in your view, knowing what you now know, having done this for a long time, so top 3 attributes you think is kind of really necessary to be a successful agency founder?
I think you have to have the ability to work hard, because definitely at the start, you have to put in the time. You have to be resilient. Things aren't always going to go your way. You're going to have issues with clients not paying and other stuff, and kind of the market might take a downturn, and that kind of thing. And the third one is the ability to communicate. I think the more people you bring in, the bigger the agency gets. It's all around communication. You can solve anything with communication.
Great, good tips. And then final one then. So top agency growth tip.
Oh, my top agency growth tip. The forgotten child for most agencies is their own marketing, ours included. So kind of treat yourself like you would a client, make sure you're getting stuff done, make sure you have a plan or a strategy in place, and try new stuff as well within that as well. Because we're a digital marketing agency, so it'd be incredibly easy for us to go, let's do SEO and PPC. But it ignores a lot of other channels that could be as effective, if not more effective, for selling SEO or PPC services.
Amazing. Well, look, Matthew, thank you for your time. I think it's been really insightful to kind of get that view of, the kind of the place that a lot of people want to get to. A lot of people want to get to 7 figures. You're there, and to be able to talk with experience about that process has been, very, very valuable. So thank you for your time once again, and good luck for the remainder of what's to 2024-25.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Simon.
Thanks. Bye-bye.